So you've got £13,000-ish and you want to buy an adventure bike. Well, we've got two brilliant options for you here today, the Africa Twin and the Tiger 900 Rally Pro. This one is kind of at the top of the Tiger 900 range, but for a similar price, the Africa Twin, this is the entry point. So it does present a bit of a predicament for the potential buyer, but fortunately, I'm here today with James from Adventure Bike Rider, and he's going to help us go through it and pick a winner.
Two great bikes. I know we've both spent a bit of time on both of them, and they are incredible machines, but if you've got that money to spend, it's a choice you do need to make.
And we're actually here today in the beautiful grounds of Ragley Hall for a specific reason, because this is where for the past few years the ABR Festival has been run, and it will be here again this year in...
It will be held on the 24th to the 26th of June, and I can guarantee it will be the greatest celebration of adventure biking ever held in the UK. Now, I know you haven't been to an Adventure Bike Rider Festival yet.
Not yet.
You're in for a treat. It's held in the magnificent grounds of the Ragley Hall Estate, and it is just 3 days of adventure biking, action, entertainment and fun. You know, whether you want to ride the 20-kilometre off-road route, which is big bike friendly, and there's a complete beginner section as well, whether you want to go on road ride outs, whether you want to explore the adventure village, listen to live music going on throughout the weekends, or enjoy a few pints, and there's always a pint for £3 with friends. There's just a huge amount going on, and it is an absolutely fantastic weekend that's not to be missed.
Sounds amazing. I'm looking forward to my first experience here. I'll be here hopefully doing some talks potentially.
Hopefully, if we can convince you to come along and give some talks at the campfire, that'd be fantastic.
All right, let's jump into these two bikes and we'll start with the engine, the beating heart of any motorcycle, and they're kind of different but kind of similar. So we've got an inline triple on the Tiger, 900-ish cc, and then a parallel twin with a 270 crank, 1100 on the Africa Twin. I say they're kind of different because obviously one's a triple and one's a twin, but Triumph did fit the T-plane crank to this bike, so it's not a typical smooth triple. It's actually got a bit of a rough growl to it, and they've done that to make it more competitive with the likes of the KTM, the Africa Twin. And yeah, I think it has worked to some extent. I rode my Tiger 800 this morning to Fowler's in Bristol, who were kind enough to lend me this bike for the day to shoot this review. And jumping from one bike to the other, the previous gen Tiger 800 onto this, you definitely feel more of that twinny vibe to it. Power wise, they're actually fairly similar, so about 100 horsepower peak on the Africa Twin and then about 95 I believe on the Tiger. But in terms of torque, that extra couple of hundred cc's of displacement, that means that the Africa Twin is able to make more peak torque and lower down in the rev range. Now you've had this bike for what, a couple of months? This is a long-term loaner, is it?
Yeah, so this is the 2022 Africa Twin that we received probably a few weeks before Christmas as a long-term review bike for Adventure Bike Rider magazine from Honda. But we have had the previous model Africa Twin for about a year before that, I think. So we've got to know it pretty well. The 2022 model, very similar to the 2021 one. So there's not a lot of difference. But it's interesting, you say the beating heart of the bike, and it's almost the ultimate cliche to describe an engine, but it's so true when you talk about these two bikes, isn't it? Cliche alert going on, but it really is. And two bikes that make similar amount of power. There is more than enough power on both of these bikes to take you, a pillion, some luggage across Europe, over the Alps and beyond. That's not something up for discussion really between the two.
Sure.
But the way they deliver that power and the character from the engines is very different. You spent a bit of time on Africa Twin, haven't you? And that engine is so full of character, isn't it? Yeah,
I think a big part, something that I noticed with it, I think is that exhaust control valve. They say it kind of shuts and gives it that more pulsing exhaust note down in low revs, and the first time I had one delivered to review, I just fired it up and I thought, wow, it really does. They describe it as a throbbing exhaust note, which is a little bit of a bold choice of words.
A little bit adult entertainment there. Yeah, but it is pleasurable.
But it is, and I kind of get it, and it just is really satisfying. And then, like I say, that really torquey mid-range just make it a brilliant engine. Be it in this, I've tried the Rebel 1100, I was on the NT 1100 launch the other day. In any bike, I think it's a really nice engine to ride. It doesn't rev out forever and make loads of peak power like your big
Yeah.
super adventure bikes, but for most stuff, like you described, there's no doubt that it's enough, and it's really, like you say, pleasurable to ride, I suppose.
Getting very excited
That's in
about
my
the
mind
Honda
now.
But it's so true. You know, the CRF1100L, so the previous model Africa Twin, it lacked a good exhaust note. That was
Right.
one of the things really lacking in it. And when they came out with the 1100, just hearing the rumble just moves your soul. It moves your body and soul. And that's the same when you're in the saddle. You know, the noise is incredible, but the vibration you get through the engine as well is almost very un-Honda. It's
Yeah.
not particularly refined in the most magnificent way. It really does stir you and makes you really thoroughly enjoy the ride.
Now, what was interesting about that is you're saying that what you love about that bike is the vibes almost, the character.
It feeds your soul, it does, yeah.
So that kind of makes me think, well, Triumph were on the right lines when they decided to introduce the T-plane crank into this bike to give it more of that? Or do you think that the smoothness of the triple almost was its, USP, its main selling point?
Yeah, well, I'm one of those old farts that harks back to not that long ago, actually, but the Tiger 800, which is a bike you have. And I love that silky smooth triple engine. And it defined the bike in a way. It was its beating heart. And in the 900, they've got rid of that smoothness. They've made it a little bit more vibration, and it's a little bit more tractable, good if you're riding off-road and things like that. It depends what type of engine you like. You know, I've said I like the deep vibrations of the Twin here, but I like the high-end smooth silkiness of the 800. So I think that the Tiger 900 is a really nice engine. It delivers power very, very well. It just doesn't have quite the same character as the Africa Twin.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. I really like this engine. It's versatile, like you say. It does have that low-end off-roadiness, and then it does rev up quite nicely, being a triple. But I think out of the two, if I had to pick one just for that extra meatiness, I think that this bike has, that one might be my pick. Onto the handling, and we've got very similar bikes here in many ways. So a 21-inch front wheel, similar upside-down forks with full adjustability, similar fully adjustable shock with a remote preload adjuster, fairly similar radially mounted monoblock brakes, although I think the Tiger, it's fair to say, probably has slightly better spec brakes. So Brembo style Emma calipers, a radial master cylinder, braided hoses, so it really does have quite a sporty braking setup. But on the road anyway, they're pretty similar to ride, aren't they?
Yeah, you know, they're big adventure bikes with big 21-inch front wheels. I think if you push these bikes really hard, you enjoy doing track days and things like that, then you'll probably find their limits. As an adventure biker, that's not something I do. Whereas if I'm, cruising along, slicing through some country lanes, they both handle really well, and they're both, more than capable of having a lot of fun. They don't feel vague. The steering's pretty agile for what they are, and I certainly don't ever feel they lack it in any way in the handling department.
Size-wise, they're pretty similar as well, aren't they? When you sit on each bike, there are slight differences in the riding position. We'll get onto that in a bit. But in terms of like one being a big, cumbersome adventure bike and one being smaller, I mean, we do have the different engine sizes, but physically, they're pretty similar as well.
Yeah, I think the Africa Twin does feel like a big bike, and I quite like that. I quite like the feeling of barreling down the road on a big bike with a lot of road presence, but it really is surprisingly agile, and particularly at slow speeds, where you start rolling slowly, and, oh God, I'm going to enter the world of cliches here, but you do feel that weight just disappearing to an extent. So I think if you're used to riding big bikes, you certainly won't be put off by the size of either of them, really.
And with regards to riding off-road, I think you said you've done quite a bit at the Adventure Centre on this bike, and then myself, I went on the launch for the Tiger 900 in Morocco. We did a whole day of riding off-road there. Both of us came away, I think, thinking each of them were pretty decent off-road as well.
Yeah, and I always preface this by saying I'm no off-road riding god. I'm not. I enjoy it. I enjoy doing a few green lanes, but I'm very, very average ability, and I think it's great because the majority of people who will want to ride these bikes off-road, if they do, will probably be of average ability as well. And the thing about the Africa Twin that most impressed me is that it's damning with faint praise a little bit, but it's like a tractor when it goes uphill. I was at the Honda Adventure Centre down in Exmoor, and the thing just motored up the steepest of inclines and really surprised me at how capable it is. And as ever, we say this with these adventure bikes, the bikes are far more capable than the rider, particularly when I'm doing it. But it is a very, very, very good off-road bike, as long as you're aware it is a big hulking beast. It's not going to be as agile and as nimble as a trail bike, but for a bike of its size, very good. Haven't done too much off-road work on the Tiger 900. a few green lanes. And again, for a big adventure bike, it handles it very well.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. You know, you got to know its limits, but it's always been much more capable than me in any sort of circumstance I've tried it in. And yes, I think we're pretty even Stevens there on the handling.
Yeah.
Comfort-wise, my next category, I think this might be where the Tiger starts to edge away a bit if we're thinking about sort of putting in big miles, just in terms of it being top spec of its model lineup, because you get a lot of kind of creature comforts. So an adjustable windscreen, full handguards here as well, so they're going to keep a little bit of the wind off your knuckles. Cruise control, heated grips, heated seats, front and rear, separate switch for the pillion seats so you can have 2 different temperatures. They really have thrown the works at it, whereas the Africa Twin being the entry point, you don't quite have as many of those little mod cons, do you?
Yeah, you're right. You're looking at the top spec Tiger 900.
Yeah.
You're looking at the entry-level Africa Twin. Now, I'm going to try and divide opinion away from my heart and my head here.
Yeah.
Because my heart loves the engine of this bike, as we've said. But right, you are missing a few creature comforts, which I think on any adventure bike which costs 13,000 or so plus pounds, you should definitely have. First of all, the screen. You know, this is a real pet hate of mine, and we're seeing it more and more on adventure bikes.
Yeah.
But an adventure bike, which generally are used for touring, mostly on road work, with a tiny stubby screen. Now, I know the thinking behind it. This is meant to be the more off-road focused version of the Africa Twin, so it's a stubby screen to help you see the trail ahead. But the reality is, the vast majority of buyers, in the UK anyway, will not be riding off-road that much on this bike. Perhaps they don't want to go for the Adventure Sports, which is more expensive, has more tech on it, and has got a bigger fuel tank. Perhaps they want the standard bike. So I cannot understand why Honda would not put an adjustable screen on this bike. Yeah,
I mean, the solution is simple, isn't it? If you want to see a bit more of the trail, and then if you're wanting some wind protection, pop it back up. It's a bit of a shame, and I've always thought the same. And it's the same with the handguards as well, isn't it, really?
Yeah, you know, they're plastic, and they're relatively small.
Yeah.
So you're going to get wind chill. I commute on this bike. I've been commuting the last couple of weeks in the depth of winter, and it's really taken away from the pleasure of riding it. It's an easy fix. Just get a bigger screen and get some bigger handguards. But at this price point, that's something that I'd want to see coming straight out of the dealership.
I'd say the fundamentals of the riding positions, I think you thought that you're a little bit further forward on the Tiger and a little bit more sporty, so slightly more road bias. But again, much like I was saying with the handling, it's not night and day between the two. I think if you look at the shape of the saddles here, the sort of height of the pegs, the bar position, they are fairly similar. So ergonomically, you know, there's not a massive amount between them. And that's why I think it's those little gadgets that sort of make this the one that's, you know, if you're doing a big motorway stretch, you'd probably pick this one. What I will say is the price gap between them is about, I think it's about 600 or 700 quid. So if you were doing a very direct comparison, you could probably treat yourself to a couple of those bits from the Honda accessories catalogue that would sort of make it a little bit more appropriate for distance riding. So extending the handguards, heated grips, extending the windscreen, and you've got something that's more fit for purpose.
But you know what, despite that, I'm going to be completely contrary here. I would go for the Africa Twin on a long distance journey. Again, they're both great over long distances, but I love that upright seating position that you get with the Africa Twin. You kind of sit in the bike more than on it, and it just feels like a big road beast as you barrel down the road, and I really enjoy riding it. And personally, I'll probably splash out a few quid on those extras if I was going to do a long distance journey on it.
I think this is the first one we've fundamentally disagreed on. I just couldn't ever pick that for motorway riding and touring in this spec. And so I think we'll have to give it 1 point from you for the Africa Twin and 1 point for me on this. Now, what's your take on tech? Because I think most motorcyclists are somewhat split. You know, some people want the bare minimum and they don't want anything extra to go wrong. Other people love all the bits and bobs. Which camp are you in?
So I've got a little bit of a thing at the moment, and this might change in a few weeks' time, but I spend far too much of my life looking at screens. You know, I do. I look at a computer screen all day when I'm editing Adventure Bike Rider magazine. I've got my phone, I go home, it's dark, I watch television. So when I ride a motorbike, the last thing I want to do is be fiddling around with a screen. Now, it's a slightly odd thing to say, because if I'm buying a premium price motorbike, which both of these really are, I expect a TFT dash, but I don't want it to be overly complicated. Despite the fact I adore the Africa Twin, I think it's an outstanding bike. I really dislike that button, the left-hand switch gear. Well, the 14 buttons on the left-hand switch gear. It's just overcomplicated, and I have to sort through so many menus to get to what I want. I have to press 2 buttons to get my heated grips on. For me, it's overkill. Now, I throw this out there maybe as a bit of a Luddite, because Ollie in our team, who's in his mid-20s, iPhone generation, jumped on there, fiddles through it, no problem at all.
Yeah.
For me, it's just overkill.
I do understand what you're saying, especially if you get the DCT version, which adds even more buttons onto the right-hand switchgear. Certainly when I was on the NT1100 launch, we talked about that earlier, jumped on that bike, and you've got to remind yourself to concentrate on riding, you know, fundamentally, because there are so many distractions. But there are some saving graces for the Honda bikes and the Africa Twin in the fact that I think the big one for me is that it has CarPlay. So when you do need navigation, when you do need a screen, when you're going somewhere that you haven't been before and you just want to get there as quickly as possible, you can't beat either Google Maps or Waze. I've always found in the city. I used to do a lot of my riding in London, and especially in the car as well, using Waze, it just always seems to pick the sort of quickest route in urban traffic. And the option to use those on a motorcycle is absolutely brilliant. And so far, that's been for the Goldwing. You could get CarPlay, some of the big Harley Tourers, but adventure bikes and smaller bikes than those massive Tourers, this is pretty much the only place you can get it. And it really is a treat to have it, I'd say.
Yeah, and you know what? When I sat down with the manual and figured out how to use it, it works very, very well. You've got 2 screens on the Africa Twin. You've got a big TFT and you've got a smaller LCD below, which you look at and think, why the hell's it got 2 screens? Well, that big screen comes up with a big Google map. So the small LCD below just gives you, I think, your gear position indicator and your speed. So when it works, yeah, it's really helpful. I like it. I just kind of wish that Honda had done something, I don't know, whether it's BMW GS style Wonder Wheel or something like that, just to reduce the amount of buttons, or at least backlight those buttons when it's dark.
I think the Triumph has done a much better job of that sort of stuff. You do get the 7-inch TFT display. You do get backlit switches. You've got a little joystick, which I think is sort of what you're talking about, in that it's a little bit easier to navigate around. You've also got some other nice little extras like the quick shifters standard on this bike. And as a tech package, it really does feel very good. You've got all your riding modes, and then I think there are 7 riding modes actually on the Rally Pro, because you get Off-Road Pro where you can switch everything off. So it really doesn't have much that I can think of that you'd be wanting. The only thing I will say is that in order to use it for nav, that lovely big 7-inch TFT display, you've got to use the My Triumph app, and I found it does drop in and out a bit. And if I had to choose for the more reliable and usable navigation system, it would be CarPlay.
Yeah. Or you can use the Africa Twin's system with an Android, which I do. And the Africa Twin as well, we're talking about rider modes, different settings and traction controls. You know, you can really fiddle with this bike to tailor it to suit your needs. Again, that's not really something that I enjoy doing. I like to jump on a bike and go for a ride. But, you know, the tour mode is great. The twist open the throttle, and it really does dart forward. The urban mode dampens it a bit. So, yeah, you've got everything there in terms of rider aids.
But I think this is just a little bit more intuitive and pleasingly designed. Look at those switch gear, the way that the interfaces are designed. That looks a little bit, I said in my original review, the layout of that screen is like a machine that you'd find in like a hospital. It looks a bit medical, doesn't it? Whereas this is a bit more dramatic.
And you know what? I like almost the basic approach to switch gear. Those big knobbly buttons, which probably don't look quite as tech as the buttons on the Africa Twin. But this time of year, when I'm bearing big winter gloves, it's just perfect for trying to thumb, whether it's your hazards or the indicator or your horn.
Plus the backlighting. I think that's Tiger Edge is this one. Now, when I surveyed my audience, they say that I think it was either the first or second biggest factor in buying a bike was the way it looks.
Yeah.
2 great looking bikes though. I think I prefer the Tiger in the matte khaki. It's the best selling colour, the sort of like khaki green, almost army looking version of it. But they've really done a great job on all of them of giving it a slight rally vibe. I believe it was influenced by this Tramontana rally concept of the Tiger 800, and they took some of the elements like the sort of more rally shaped windscreen, these side panels, sort of lighter finish on the subframe, and sort of put them into a production bike. And I think the result is something that's a handsome looking bike. On the other hand, I've always thought the Africa Twin is like one of the best as well.
I think the Africa Twin is the best, if not the best looking adventure bike around. I think the Multistrada V4 might vie for that in a kind of smooth Italian suave kind of way. Yeah, they're both great looking bikes. I think the 900, it's got more of a, I can see you slinking through the streets of London on that bike. Maybe because it's black. It does look cool. James Bond rides a Triumph.
Yeah.
But in terms of kind of rugged adventure biker spirit, and harking back to kind of the original Africa Twin from the late 80s and early 90s, there's just something about the design of this bike that is timeless and really appeals to me. It's one of those bikes where I park up and I look away again and again. And yeah, you know, Tiger is a great looking bike, but I think the AT would do it for me here.
Well, you know, it's subjective, so I'll let the audience decide this one down in the comments. Let us know which you think is the best looking bike down below. Now, normally I'd talk about value for money here. I think it's a bit of a tough one because they're similar price point, and we've said there are strengths and weaknesses of each. I don't know if you could call a clear winner in terms of, like, does one offer a lot better value for money?
Do you know what, when you look on paper, you're going to look at the Tiger 900 and look at all the extras it's got.
Yeah.
You look at, well, for a start, you look at the screen and you look at the handguards, the heated seat, which for me, call me a wimp, but is a godsend at this time of year when you're riding in winter. The Tiger 900 is better spec'd.
Yep, engine bars, peripheral lights, and those little bits and bobs. The fundamentals, though, I think for you really like the engine on this bike, and so it's really that trade-off of, like, do you go for all the features or do you just go for the one that, you know, you like the rudiments of?
Yeah, and that's it, and that's why I say on paper the 900 wins here, because so much of riding a motorbike is not analytical. You know, it's following your heart, and if you jump on an Africa Twin and you're stirred by that engine and you love the bike, then you're going to be happy to forego a few of those extras. I really enjoy riding both bikes. I think today, if I was going to jump on it and ride a couple of 100 miles, going to contradict myself a little bit from earlier on, but with all those extras, I'd probably say, yeah, I'll go for the Tiger because it's going to be a more comfortable, easier ride. If I was to buy the bike though, and I'm thinking about, well, I could add some stuff to myself, then it's tricky. The Africa Twin on paper is not such good value for money, but you do get a cracking machine.
Yeah, I think what you've got to do is figure out what type of riding you're going to do, and therefore what accessories or features you think you'll need, and then get yourself on the configurator for both bikes, and you'll probably find out quite quickly which one makes the most sense financially. I think it's probably time to call an overall winner. I can't quite tot up the points, but I think we said the engine was better on this bike, handling wise similar, comfort wise we did a point each, tech we biased towards this one, and so I think we've come out about even Stevens there.
Which one would you buy? It's your money on the line.
Honestly, you know, I have the Tiger 800, and this just feels like a continuation of a bike that I love. The engine is a bit of a change I think I could live with, but it has a lot of the same features, you know, like I said, the ease of use, the sort of aesthetic of it, the way it handles, and it just takes the Tiger 8 and then adds a bit, you know, a bigger screen, those Brembo brakes, slightly better suspension. And so I think for me, I've done so many miles this winter with that heated seat and heated grips. I'm feeling all snug on my Tiger 8, and it would just be, you know, like I say, a continuation of that. That said, I've got the Adventure Sports of the Africa Twin coming. In fact, it's been delivered to my house today.
You're lucky.
My wife
lucky
let them
man.
into the garage to drop it off. And yeah, I think come back to me after I've ridden that for a few weeks and see what I say.
I think
What about you?
My head would say the Tiger.
Yeah.
You know, if we're looking at, I've got a certain amount of money to spend and I've got to choose between these two, my head would say the Tiger because it is a great machine. It's got all those extras and you can't go wrong with it. But my heart would say the Africa Twin, probably for two reasons: back to the engine and also back to that seating position, because I just feel like king of the road when I'm sitting in an Africa Twin.
All right, well, I think that basically is clear as mud, is it? Hope you've enjoyed it regardless. Let me know how you're all getting on in the comments below, and if you've got any questions, we'll try and get back to you. And if you're new here and you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time.